Have you ever played a game where you thought that the ending was really bad and it therefore soured your whole experience? To me, that happens actually pretty often, and I do understand why, as it's hard to be faithful to the service material and the essence of the game while bringing it all back to create something memorable and long-lasting. But with all that said, I've rarely, if ever, played a game where I thought the exact same idea but about its beginning. The first 30 minutes of the Chant are the worst of the game, and that's a shame because mankind has a tendency to remember its first and last interactions with any given activity. More specifically, that concept is called the serial position effect. In general idea is that if you receive a long list of a bunch of names on it, you'll naturally remember the beginning and end of the list more vividly than the middle part. It is essentially a human instinct which can be easily tapped into by outside sources, notably in marketing. As explained in the TechTarget article on the subject, when advertising a product, it is important to place the most important information to the potential customer first and last, as it is most likely to influence a buyer's decision. E-commerce websites position products on the product page carefully as well, showing the product that they would like to sell near the beginning. The same thing actually applies to YouTube. When you write something in a search engine, you're most likely to click on the top videos. Therefore, releasing stuff as early as possible and getting a bunch of clicks helps ensure that your video is located higher in the search chart. If you wish to learn more about the subject matter, you'll find the links to my references in the video description as usual. If you apply that same concept to movies and video games, we then get to observe an interesting pattern. Most, if not all, successful movies and video games will depict an epic scene at the beginning of the experience in an attempt of creating a link with the consumer. It can be an epic depiction of war, which often mirrors the end segment of the movie. It could also come in other forms, like giving the consumer exactly what he paid for at the start, therefore promising more in the long term. A classic way this is done in video games, for example, is by starting the player with a maxed out character before removing it somehow, enticing the player to stick with the game. Ultimately, there are countless ways of executing this concept, but its bigger purpose is to convince the consumer that the product they're consuming is worth their time and money. In case you weren't aware, statistics have shown that the average player is about 34 years old, has some form of household, and has a kid. On average, that age group plays less than 8 hours a week, so less than an hour per day. Welcome to the downside of growing up, right? That just shows you how important it is for the game to start strong, because it's ultimately competing with all the other distractions that the average person has to face on a regular basis. This is also the moment where the player comes in with expectations, and therefore is looking for proof that his purchase was well made, and if not, he will return it. It's a cruel world indeed, but that's just how the system works, unfortunately. The same idea comes into play when you analyze the importance of a great ending. Those last moments seal the whole experience, stay in the consciousness of the user because there's nothing else to override it. It's also the moment where the whole story pays off and we, the enjoyer, receive dividends for sticking with it. That's why the final climax is extremely important. It's the moment that brings it all together, makes you feel good, and leaves you mesmerized for the rest of the day, and therefore making you more likely to share your experience with someone. That's why, when we try to recall our favorite moments at any given art piece, we're more inclined to bring up the ending. In other words, those are some of the reasons why it's hard to create a good ending, as it has to live up to the expectations which were built throughout the whole experience while offering something epic and long-lasting. It's therefore by analyzing it that we build a bigger appreciation for the art. It makes us pay attention to it on our next similar encounter. By contrast, I also wasn't planning on making a video on this video game, as I wanted to concentrate on other experiences, but I think that there's a lot to learn from it, and as it's also the first game from this Canadian company, I thought that it would be the perfect learning opportunity to venture into and see what mistakes were made and how we can avoid in our own projects. In other words, it's by exposing ourselves and experiencing them that we develop our sense of understanding, and it's that wisdom that turns us into grounded and responsible consumers. It means that the more you consume faulty products, the better you'll be able to appreciate those that flourish you, while being able to pinpoint exactly why you feel that way. Now, before we get into the video any further, I want to mention that this doesn't mean that the game is utterly bad. It's currently sitting at a comfortable, mostly positive rating on Steam, and the rest of the reviews are around the 70% mark. It has some good elements, and I'll get into them later, but I felt like mentioning it as this video will be portraying the game in a more negative light than what I usually do. That's because of the change in format compared to my other videos. I did so because I feel that all the issues are concentrated at the start and do more harm to the game than is able to fix in its entirety. Just keep in mind that this is indeed one man's opinion, so you may disagree with what I have to say, and honestly, that's totally fine. Lastly, this video will be split into 2 parts. The first part will analyze the beginning, so the first 30 minutes more or less of the game will be spoiled. As the game is 6 hours long, or 4.5 hours for my first playthrough, it's not such a big deal in the grand scheme of things. Afterwards, we'll compare it with the beginning of the critically acclaimed Alan Wake game, in order to see how they could have done it better. Now, without any further interruptions, welcome to Gaming with Jovy, and today, I want to talk about the Chant. Unlike what you might expect, I actually really liked the first scene of the game. It starts with a cult follower wearing a pretty cool mask, chanting a ritual of some sorts. His followers, mesmerized by his every word, follow his lead and are synchronized with him. Their efforts spawn a portal, and the leader then requests that his daughter brings him the piece to the ritual. She, the only one not wearing a mask, hesitantly examines her pregnant stomach before deciding to run away. I know it's a minor detail here, but he should have been tipped off when he saw that she wasn't wearing her mask, but whatever. Frustrated and surprised, the leader sends his goons after her and states that
doomed without her.
We then get to control her and have to run away from the aggressors. We follow the set path and evade anything that crosses our way. I have to say that I really like this part. There are some nice colors in the foreground and background, and it helps create this sense of curiosity as it abstracts more of the visible textures. That's also pretty good, as a lot of those textures clearly have low poly count, and as we're rushing through it, we don't really have much time to realize it. We then cross an obstacle by pressing the X button and see a bunch of people worshipping a human offering of sorts. Note that she's also not wearing a mask, so either our character was supposed to be offered as a sacrifice of some sorts, or it's not related in any way because, you know, she wasn't strapped to a structure. We then avoid the encounter and keep running, and I soon realize that there's something wrong with the animations. When you look at the way she opens the door, or falls on the ground, you can see that the speed is off, which isn't a big deal, but sure removes you from the immersion. There's also this part where I slide over a log, and this cultist just casually waits for me to finish, removing all tension from the case. I mean, you saw how slowly she went over it and how close he is to her. There's no way that he couldn't have interrupted the animation, therefore causing a game over. We then learn to shove enemies by screaming at them? Okay, cool, I guess. And that's when we get to the end of the path. We run to the coastline and look back, not to find any cultists, but a monster stalking her. She mentally gets herself ready for what's about to come as she jumps in the water. Jumping into the rocks below and risking death on impact was better than fighting whatever was behind her, and from a story perspective, I actually really like this decision. It makes us react while creating intrigue. It also builds tension knowing that we'll have to face that creature later on. Overall, we've only seen the first 2 minutes of the game, and despite those weird animation mistakes, it's pretty good. Unfortunately, this is where the problems start piling up rapidly and where the quality of the whole experience starts declining as well. We're then brought to the present time, and we see a young lady doing her regular jogga. She looks into the water and sees a corpse floating in the water, only to realize it's an hallucination.
Why did you leave me?
She then calls a person who answers by the name of Kim and decides to make the drastic decision of going to the retreat as the camera pans towards the sky and fades to black. The problem with the scene is that the pacing is way too fast. It takes less than a minute in game for her to decide that she'll quit everything, and I mean everything. Like her job, her future plans and obligations, just to go to the island we saw in the previous scene. The reason it doesn't work is that number one, it's not realistic. And number two, we can't create a connection with her. She's the main protagonist and we can't understand how she got to that big decision because we're still processing what happened so far. Plus, a common theme with my reasoning is that we have no way to compare her life from before with the present. She clearly has seen other corpses as she's indirectly suggested in that phone call. So what makes this body different from the others? What did she try before, resorting to what sounds like a last resort as she clearly didn't want to go there beforehand? In other words, we feel robbed of the thought process and history that led her to making such a decision, and one that she's hoping will be a life-changing one. The worst part is that this very idea isn't even explained in the game. We do find out why she saw a corpse on that fateful day, but not what decision led her to accept the offer, which is a total waste opportunity in my opinion. The camera pans towards her on the boat while she's lost in her thoughts. We can see that the words mind, body and soul in bold at the top which sound like normal propaganda for these things, but end up actually having a bigger importance later on. A portrait of a man is also located at the bottom, so we can presume that we're on our way to meet him. We turn the pamphlet around, and the title of the document is Prismic Science. Having no idea what that is, I can assume that the game will explain it in due time. She then puts the pamphlet aside and gets up to look at the scenery. If you disregard the pop-in happening in the background, I do have to admit that it's actually pretty cool. It seems to be lacking some detail for sure, but as this is a project made by a small indie dev, I find this more than acceptable, and I think that it does well what it's set out to do. Make you feel the sense of grandeur and richness of the landscape. It makes me want to go there, as I'm sure that the view from the coast is beautiful, and as a place for meditation, that's certainly a perfect place to do it. One other interesting thing is that the structure that held the portal is located on the rule of thirds, therefore making it immediately noticeable to the player. We can see that the portal is no longer active there, so whatever we saw at the beginning of the game is now gone for some reason. She gets off the boat and the young lady greets us as the boat leaves them behind. They exchange some dialogue and we find out that she's her friend Kim, and looking at her closely, there's something uncanny of her. I couldn't really pinpoint what it was until I asked my brother to look at the footage, and noticed that she keeps smiling when she was done talking. It feels very unnatural and somewhat robotic. I know that this is very subtle, but it was enough for me to lose my immersion and to start wondering what went wrong instead of listening to what she actually had to say. Kim then decides that they should leave the area and go towards the camp as everyone is waiting for her. She then teaches us the art of running, or in this case, jogging. Our protagonist, whose name is Jess by the way, decides to ask her what kind of man Tyler is, to which she replies,
Tyler is like no one I've ever met. He's a very special teacher who has such depth. He really understands me.
Is that a whole lot of nothing? Like, did that even mean anything? They then head up the hill, and Kim asks Jess if she wrote the letter she requested. We rapidly learn that Kim asked her to write a letter to her future self, and while we learn this, we get to admire the gorgeous view. This is easily the best that the game has to offer. I find it really beautiful how we get to see a bunch of islands in the far distance, with the blue ocean going further than the eye can see. More importantly, I totally believe that people will meditate here. The devs really did a good job so far. I'm really digging the environment design. The only negative that I can give them is that it lacks any sign of life, like birds and animal forests alike, but as it stands, pretty good nonetheless. Can't complain. Once we're done sightseeing, Kim instructs us to drop the letter in the mailbox, and while we do so, I want to emphasize the hugely missed opportunity here. We can't read or examine the letter, so the letter comes out of nowhere, and to top it off, we don't get any insight into her thought process. It would have been the perfect moment to add some reality needed to the character development, but as it stands, it's just a delivery quest like any other. We then get to the custom mailbox, and by opening it, we get attacked by flies. Panicked, she hysterically runs towards Kim, and in order to calm us down, that's when she teaches us the meditation skill. She reveals our mind stat by using the spirit stat. Remember when I said that the words in bold had importance? Well, this is what I mean, as all three stats have their own skills and affect a specific aspect of the gameplay. Now that we've cleared our mind, so to speak, Kim then leads us further into the forest. Now, before we do so, I want to mention that we actually didn't deliver the letter inside the mailbox. When we opened the door, we were immediately attacked by the flies, so we never actually placed it inside. Although, we no longer have the letter in our inventory, and both of them no longer care about it, so this part was clearly less about the letter and more about her teaching us how to hold a button for a certain amount of time. Cool. While going up the path, Kim instructs us to pick up a sage plant next to her and states that she'll teach us a cool trick soon. We then follow her some more until we arrive to the front of a pretty cool passage of sorts. The problem is that the ball of flies blocks our passage, so Kim instructs us to find some twine. Conveniently, there's some in the path next to her, so we get there, grab it, and then we're instructed to combine both plants in order to make a weapon. Press the R2 button for PS5 will make Jess perform a light attack, and holding the button results in a heavy attack. As you can see, both animations are indeed different, even if they look pretty similar, so I'm happy that they didn't try to pull a fast one on us. Overall, it's some pretty basic stuff, so far, it works. Let's just hope that it gets more complex further down the line, as it can become pretty boring in the long run. We then exit through the gate, and Jess asks Kim about the origins of the structure, to which Kim replies,
Tyler's family used to run a commune in the 70s. There's a lot of awesome art on the island.
She then enters inside the tunnel, and we're introduced to the darkness mechanic. We literally lose our mind when we're not in the light, so we either have to avoid it entirely or cross as fast as possible. Also, you would think that she would run towards the light as she's scared of the dark, but I guess that's just me, so enjoy the slow walk. We then jog to the end of the path and we get to absorb the atmosphere. I do like the design of the settlement though, as it seems spacious and minimalistic. It is indeed a place of rest, so they only constructed a minimum in order to keep their nature as intact as possible. The design on the roof is also a nice touch as it makes it stand out from the rest, and behind it is a cool looking dome which is clearly the meditation area. Note that it's pretty small and it wouldn't be able to accommodate all the people that we saw at the beginning, so either there are more facilities somewhere or it was all destroyed and rebuilt. Now here's the first cutscene, and I'll play it in its entirety as it's the only character development we get.
Hannah!
You must be Jess. Everyone's excited to finally meet you. Kim has already shared so much. That is Sunny. And Maya. Welcome to our humble retreat. I hope the walk here wasn't too difficult.
Welcome. I understand it took some convincing, but we're so glad you came. Kim is a good friend to you, and that makes you a good friend to us. I'm sure you have many questions, but isn't that how our spiritual journey begins?
Honestly, I'm not a very spiritual person.
We're all here to support each other. Kim truly desires to heal the wounds, both hers and yours.
Yeah. That's why I'm here too. It's just a bit intense.
I understand. Why don't you get settled in? Get to know the others a little better before tonight's session.
So, just as a quick recap, we find out that Anna is a kind soul and is very welcoming. We can also deduct that she's the person with authority and she's the one to introduce us to the others, which I honestly find weird as the lack of people makes it more like a camping trip than an actual retreat, but maybe that's just me. Another interesting thing is how Jess doesn't seem interested in any of it. She seems annoyed by the introduction, and then when the leader of the group shows up, she doesn't even seem impressed. Plus, look at this tone of shift when she said that she's not a spiritual person.
Honestly, I'm not a very spiritual person.
We're all here to support each other.
He's not keen on guiding people that aren't already sold to the idea? I just find it weird as the game says he's an awesome mentor in person, but all I can see is, well, a polite asshole. Once the cutscene is done, we're asked to go and meet the others as they're all friendly people. As Kim leaves us, we get to explore the area, so I turn around and head inside the shack behind me, and this is where we meet Maya. As you probably guessed already, she gives us a new quest which results in another tutorial. We have to bring 3 plants to her for her to make the tea, and I'm honestly sort of disappointed by it. I would have really liked to get to know these characters, but all I've done so far is somehow related to a tutorial. I therefore complete the quest and hope that afterwards, I'll be rewarded with some context or anything that will flesh her out in some way. Also, when I examine the back of the shack, there seems to be a garden and some plants of sorts, so I sort of feel like I did this for nothing. I enter the shack and give her the plants, to which she states,
These are measured perfectly. Have you done this before?
Actually, I work in biomedicine. I used to spend a lot of time doing field work, but lately it's boring desk work.
I see.
Maya then asks if we really do animal testing, and we're then introduced to a very useless system in the game. We then get to reply to her question by choosing between the 3 perk categories I spoke about previously. They honestly really don't add anything, so no matter what you answer, Maya will always continue the dialogue the same way. She will tell you to bring it up during the meditation process, and she then goes back to cooking. Note that the plant right there is also floating and nothing is keeping it attached to the hook. Afterwards, Maya turns around and starts preparing some ingredients, but nothing is in her hands. It's just crushing the air, and it looks like she's busy. Plus, the other character development we get from her is not even from her per se, but from the letter we found on the counter. We find that she's preparing the ceremonial tea, and on the back of it, we find a random note about her not liking to drink tea until she tried it many years after. Why is this written on the back of the recipe addressed to no one is beyond me. Overall, very disappointing. Also, I can't even open the door that leads to the back of the shed, so you win this round, I guess. I then walk to the edge of the water. To my surprise, Jess doesn't start seeing a dead body. Actually, there's nothing in or on the water. No fish, algae, or anything else populates the bottom. Back to the body though. I guess that it just serves to push the plot forward, and that's about it. You may also think that it's too early to know for sure, but as I finished the game twice by now, I can confirm to you that it doesn't happen again. I then head up the path and find a tent where Tyler and Anna are talking about tonight's meditation session. Note that, if you let them finish talking and don't cross the invisible detection wall, Anna will keep moving as if she's talking even though she's clearly not saying a single word. We then get closer and, as before, Anna greets us hospitably. It's Tyler who's weird, as he just disappears inside the tent and makes Anna follow him. Talk about being friendly. I'm honestly not trusting this guy, and let me remind you that he's the sole reason why this retreat is even operational. He's supposed to be charismatic, intelligent, and welcoming, and yet I'm not getting any of that. Overall, our quest to meet everyone has been pretty futile, as one person used us as free labor, and the other two ditched us practically immediately. I'm not getting any good vibes from this place, and not to mention that Kim also seems possessed. I mean, look at her. You can also body slam her, and she doesn't acknowledge our presence. I honestly wish her the best of luck, and head into the other shack, which is where we get to meet the last character of the game. Now, if you need more proof that something is definitely wrong with the facial animation, then look at how this guy reacts during this cutscene.
Hey, Jess, right? You probably heard about the Spirit Ember Festival I started. It was going to ignite change. But my dad and brother pulled the plug and let everyone down. Check these out. Tyler and I are going to take my ideas and transform this island into something glorious. A true spiritual paradise. Amazing, right? I know it's a lot to take in. Just go watch my orientation video to learn all about it. It's near Tyler's dome.
Honestly, I haven't seen this level of bad facial animation since Mass Effect Andromeda. The way he moves his eyebrows is just unsettling, and with the placement of the eyes, it doesn't seem like he's even looking at us. His body is also too stiff, so overall, it's pretty creepy. Now, to be fair, I understand that making a human face believable is a daunting task, and I wouldn't be able to pull it off in any way, but I simply can't fathom what made them accept it the way it is. They also mocap their actors, so I have no idea how I arrived at this.
You know, wearing the motion capture suit and the camera right in front of your face, being able to use my physicality in a way that I haven't had to before.
On the other hand, the good news is that we finally get some character development. He's a programmer and is in charge of the marketing of the group. I guess that he's not that successful, as he was only able to get them 4 followers, but let's not jump to conclusions here. Here's the full video that he gave us, and I want you to listen carefully to what he says during his marketing speech.
Open your mind to a whole new way of being. There's real spiritual opportunity here. Prismic science is the key to profound realignment of your entire way of being. You may be asking, what is prismic science, and how does it work? Scientific and mathematical principles applied to spiritual growth in a way that gives real results. Do you want people in your life to understand your true value? Do you? Then prismic science will help your light shine bright. I wasn't a spiritual guy, but when I began to understand prismic science, I found a key to profound realignment in my life's purpose. It changed my life, and it will change yours. Welcome to the Prismic Spiritual Retreat, and prepare for your life to never be the same.
Now, let's be honest. That's gonna be the most anyone has said nothing for like a full minute. I particularly love how he asked the question, what is prismic science? And then proceeds to tell us it's a combination of scientific and mathematical principles that give real results. Like, what does that even mean? I also love just how Jess is super unfazed by all this. Nothing she sees or hears impresses her or makes her react. She's just going through the motions, and that's about it. In case you were wondering, we do find some of these films later on, and they're pretty much all as useless as this one. It gets sort of interesting, but as they're all this short, there's just not enough substance for it to be truly interesting. Lastly, before I move on, in Sony's cabin there's a door which is locked that leads to the main entrance, and I just felt like mentioning it as it'll be relevant for my end portion of the video. Additionally, Sony also seems so immersed that he doesn't care that I'm turning around him like an hyperactive child. I guess he's just as bewitched as Kim is. Now, after we've done all of that, Kim is finally free from her mental prison and asks us to come closer. She tells us to put on some cult uniform before asking us to get ready for the ceremony. Fun fact, the reason followers wear uniforms is to create a sense of union between themselves, while removing their individual traits. Other people can also easily identify them with said group, and that creates a new sense of identity. The colors, the way the clothes envelop the body, and more also help reinforce this notion, as it sends a clear message to the person viewing it. For example, a tight uniform with darker colors looks intimidating and military, unlike the more baggy and liberal ones. We often judge a person by the way that they're dressed, so you would be surprised just how much a few pieces of cloth can really affect our perception of the world. As usual, I encourage you to do your own research, as knowing as much as possible about ourselves helps us have a greater control on the factors that influence our decisions. Now, back to the game though. We time-lapse to the evening, and the ceremony is about to start. We sit on the low poly fur carpet, and drink the freshly prepared mushroom tea. This is where the shit hits the fan. Kim almost immediately bad trips and goes berserk.
Stop blaming me! It's not my fault!
She then leaves the circle as Tyler tells her to sit down. Everyone except Jess goes after her, breaking the ceremony and probably causing the same problem as the beginning of the game. Jess, on the other hand, passes out while looking at the eldritch being floating in front of her.
Don't swim out.
When she wakes up, everyone is gone and it's our job to fix the issue, which marks the end of the chapter and the start of my final analysis. If we forget the technical issues and only concentrate on the story and gameplay aspect, the reason it doesn't work is because the game doesn't give us a reason to go along with the flow. Right now, we have to go save Kim, but I have no reason to do so. The game says that she's a good friend of ours, but I have no idea why that is. She only gives us exposition and guides us through the tutorial. She disregards our fears and then makes us walk through the dark path alone, and then she ditches us during the meeting phase. That lack of information ultimately means that I have no idea who she is or why I should even care. The same thing goes for the rest of the characters. We know nothing about Maya, other than she's the group's cook and that she now likes tea, which is not relevant for the rest of the game. At least she doesn't give a bad impression, unlike Tyler. To make matters worse, we only see that guy 5 times in the whole game. We've actually seen the first 2 interactions with him, and here's the third one just for fun, and I want you to really pay attention to how he reacts and moves throughout this whole encounter.
Ah! Get away from me! Oh, it's you. Don't startle me like that. It's her own fault, okay? She broke the circle.
After you drugged us?
I didn't drug you. That tea is 100% organic. Everything is going wrong. I don't know what to do. What should I do?
Just tell me where Kim went. What happened?
You could almost see a red aura around her. That's how angry she was. She was trying to kill me. I swear. She took off that way. Look, I'm gonna chill here for a bit. Maybe smoke something. Get me if you need me, okay?
Does he look like an awesome leader? They could have hardly made him more useless. I wish he would just teach me his levitation trick instead, as he's clearly not touching the floor and therefore has no shadow to cast. In the end, I think it's really a shame because in order to make the whole camp believable, nailing him is definitely essential. Also, it wouldn't have been that hard to do, as you could have just based him on a real cult leader like Jim Jones, Paul Schafer, Charles Manson, Roch Theriault, and many more. They're all charismatic individuals who have an almost surreal talent of being able to convince a crowd to to adhere to the doctrines and teaching of his ideology. Those rules and the enforcement of them give him control over people, and ultimately makes them follow the rules and ideas no matter how immoral it may be. It's a spiral of sorts, and turning back becomes less and less of an option. If you want a non-cult example, you don't need to look further than the way Hitler was able to convince a whole nation of his superiority. It's honestly very interesting, and I highly encourage you again to do your own studies, and you'll find my links to the video description as usual. Overall, if I had to sum up all the problems so far into one idea, I would say that the main issue is mostly related to its pacing. We can't be sold on the idea that this is a real place because we can't compare it to a normal day. Everything went to hell in a span of a few hours, and everything happened so fast that we just can't relate to anyone. Not to mention that the tutorial feels outdated at this point. What I mean is that instead of rushing through the intro and only covering the gameplay tutorial like games used to do in the original Xbox and the PlayStation era, we should have spent a day to meet the characters and see what attracted these people to this settlement. I can't trust Tyler because I've not seen him do anything that makes him worthy for the leader status. I don't care about Kim because she wasn't a friend as much as she was a nagging teacher. I don't trust Sony's capabilities as the only movie I've seen was Content List, and you wouldn't hold it against the player either if he thought that he was a one-note character. The only person I like so far is Anna. She's the only character that seems welcoming. Minus Maya, of course, but it's because she didn't get any development to begin with. Imagine if, instead of all this, we had a day to meet with them, talk to them, reinforce the idea that these people are indeed cool. We could get the chance to know what makes them tick, why they're here, and ultimately what they want to become. It would humanize them and give them that much needed development, and then make everything go to shit. Then we would have a reason to save Kim, help the others, and try to figure out what happened. Now, as it stands, I wouldn't blame you if you decided that it wasn't your battle to fight and you decided to leave the island, or in real life, go back to the store and get reimbursed. Just to give you a quick reality check, this game was released on November 3, 2022. Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 released on October the 28th. God of War Ragnarok, one of the most anticipated games of the year, was released on the November 9th. The Devil in Me from Supermassive Games released on November 18th. And finally, Callisto Protocol releases on December 2nd. With all those heavy hitters, why would anyone purchase this game? Last year, in 2021, 10,394 games were released on Steam. This year, in 2022, 7,123 games were released so far, and the year isn't over yet, so it's not hard to see why you need a really good product that will stand the test of time, or, to the very least, get people hooked instantly. Steam's return policy also states that the game can be returned if you played it less than 2 hours and have owned the game for maximum 14 days. And so far, I've only shown you the first 30 minutes. Think about that, honestly. Now, on a totally separate note, for some reason, the game is also more expensive on Steam than getting the physical copy. Like, the physical, I paid it $40 plus tax, but if you go on Steam right now, it is $53 plus tax. Like, I honestly don't get it. When is a physical more expensive than the digital version? Now, this is the part of the video where, in order to understand how to fix the issues that the Chant has, we're going to look at another game that actually got it right the first time, which, as I've mentioned previously, is going to be Alan Wake. It's a very unique game in the sense that it has a very unique premise, which is mirrored by its storytelling. There's a reason why people are still talking and making videos of it, even after its release in 2012, and it all started with a stellar introduction.
Stephen King once wrote that nightmares exist outside of logic, and there's little fun to be had in explanations. They're antithetical to the poetry of fear. In a horror story, the victim keeps asking why, but there can be no explanation, and there shouldn't be one. The unanswered mystery is what stays with us the longest, and it's what we'll remember in the end. My name is Alan Wake. I'm a writer.
The game opens up with a cool and eerie voiceover, spoken in literary form. It's also somewhat cheesy and helps solidify the concept that our main protagonist is indeed a writer, but probably isn't as talented as the writing quality is all over the place. It's serviceable, but that's about it. He then explains that he's been haunted by this dream almost every night, where he's driving on the road towards a lighthouse. Going too fast, he hits a person with his car, only to stop, look back and realize that he's disappeared.
I'd seen the hitchhiker too late. He was dead. I was convinced they'd put me in jail and I would never see Alice again.
light source appears over Alan, and by looking at it, we're naturally brought into the control schematics. Behind us, a wall blocks the path, and the books that he's written previously are scattered on the floor. Alan then reinstates that he has this urge to get to the lighthouse for some reason, and we can finally see the importance of light in this game. The body disappeared when the light in the car went out. The requirement for the first tutorial is to look at the lamppost, and our main objective is to get to the lighthouse. Now, the question now is, why? The car is now inoperable, and we leave it behind and follow the street lamps. When we deviate from the path and enter the tunnel, we can see that the way forward has collapsed, forcing us to go down the adjacent set of stairs. Before we do so, however, we notice the wanted poster with our face on it. We walk a little further and turn around, only to find the man we hit standing next to the car, and pay close attention to what he says as we avoid confronting him.
You don't even recognize me, do you, Ryder? You think you're God? You think you could just make up stuff? Play with people's lives and kill them when you think it adds to the drama? You're in this story now, and I'll make you suffer. You're a joke. There would be a single readable sentence in your books if it wasn't for your editor. You'll never publish another one of your shitty stories, 'cause I'm gonna kill you. It's not like your stories are any good. Not like they have any artistic merit. You're a lousy writer. Cheap thrills and pretentious shit. That's all you're good for. Just look at me. Look at your work.
It's a pretty heavy stuff for sure, and it's indeed an interesting window into Alan's state of mind. What's also really cool is that we can only hear his confession if we fight off the urge to run away from the guy, therefore rewarding you for not following your instincts. We continue to follow the path, and the light over us shatters, removing the sense of security we've been through so far. This moment therefore serves two functions. One, you won't take the light for granted, as you may lose it at any given moment, and two, you can only get attacked when the light is off, which, in this case, serves as a dodge tutorial. Now, this is actually pretty cool. Dodging is then automatically followed by the run animation, and ideally, it allows you to avoid the attack and immediately proceed to moving further away from the aggressor. It makes the combat a lot more fluent and rapid. You essentially only need to hold the button in order to execute both actions, which would normally be followed by the character, and best of all, it fits Alan's personality. He doesn't have any combat skills, just like Jessa, so that doesn't mean that he needs to be slow when responding to outside stimulus. The animation is clunky by design, but it feels fast and responsive, so somehow, the devs found a perfect balance between both extremes. Alan also isn't invulnerable during his dodge, so it does require some skill, and when you put it all off, you're rewarded with a cool cinematic shot. It's these kinds of things that we take for granted with gaming, but shine even brighter once you take the time to analyze it properly, and this game is full of those moments, which is why I chose it for this comparison. This tutorial is then followed by an escalation of circumstances, and we have to run and find some shelter. Lights guide our path only to break, forcing us to rush onwards and naturally lean towards another mechanic. Alan doesn't have a lot of stamina, and will slow down once he gets exhausted. What's interesting here is that no one told us that he would react this way. We discover it naturally, therefore creating a more natural sense of progression. We cross a freakishly long bridge, and a man on the other side urges us to reach him as the bridge collapses behind us. He tells us to get inside the cabin, and we look in despair through the window as the door locks itself behind us, leaving him outside, and therefore forced to encounter the ghost.
Oh no! Stop! No! Damn it, die! No! No! No!
We start frantically looking for something useful, anything that we can use. Then, all of the TVs activate and an all-seeing eye appears on the monitor. Even a solid building can protect you from the darkness, as it gets rammed repeatedly. We run in circles trying to find some exit of some sorts, but it's in vain as we get rammed again and lose health. Then, something unexpected happens.
Follow the light.
source of light now guides our path and instructs us to walk under the street lamp as his rays will heal us somehow. He then tells us the next few lines.
Well done. I have something important to tell you. It goes like this. For he did not know that beyond the lake he called home lies a deeper, darker ocean green, where waves are both wilder and more serene. To its ports I've been. To its ports I've been. Do you understand? No. Follow my light. I entered your dream to teach you. The darkness is dangerous. It's sleeping now. When it feels you coming, it will wake up. There's no time. I can only show you the most important thing.
If you need any more proof that his being is anything but an eldritch being of unimaginable power, he's able to spawn the attacker while rendering him non-responsive. He explains that in order for us to attack the entity, we first need to shed some light on him, removing the shadow protecting him. We may then shoot him with a revolver, making him vanish permanently.
Good. You've done well. Remember what I've taught you. That is all. I will give you back your dream now. In the nightmare, a terrible darkness was taking over the world. The lighthouse was the last safe place on Earth.
Now, this is very peculiar. Alan just glosses over the event as if it never happened and continues where he's left off, so the question is, was he even conscious about what happened, and what's the purpose of all this? We then follow the path, unlocking the flare gun, and killing more enemies until we drop down and get attacked by the tornado again.
I can keep this up forever!
Also, small detail here, the sign next to the tornado is called Alan Wake's Sudden Stop. It's the title of one of his books, and I just love the irony when juxtaposed with the current advancer. We immediately pick up the pace and run towards the lighthouse as large objects fall from the sky, destroying the bridge under us. We quickly enter the lighthouse and we are relieved when we feel the weather calming down and slowly disappearing. Alan then walks towards the center of the tower, only to learn that, as usual, nowhere is truly safe for long.
He's here. Alan, wake up.
It turns out that Alan was indeed dreaming, and that Alice, his wife, and the person he mentioned earlier in the game, will come up to inform him that they've reached their destination. This is also the part of the story where we discover a few defining elements on Alan. He's a writer that suffers from a 2-year writer's block. He's famous for his past work, and the irony is that he starts the game mentioning Stephen King. Well, we can sort of imagine a washed up version of him. Someone who has grown to despise his successes and that doesn't think of himself as highly as before. We find this out naturally as his wife asks us to pose for some pictures, and the man next to us recognizes Alan. He runs a local Radio Shack and asks for an interview, and this is the tone that Alan uses when replying.
Look, Mr. Maine, I'm on vacation. In fact, I'd appreciate it if we could keep my being here just between the two of us. I'm sure you understand.
It's respectfully arrogant, and it's the tone that persists for the rest of the segment. His agent later calls him to know how things are doing, and he seems energetic and joyful, unlike Alan, who seems annoyed that he even bothered to call.
Got it.
Are the locals giving you trouble? Just say the word, and I'll hop on a plane and come make sure that you're left alone, Al.
No, Barry, we're fine.
Great. Just want to make sure you can relax and recharge.
Because, you see, this is supposed to be to stick it out of his normal environment. His wife planned the whole trip to a small secluded town with the hopes of getting him to unwind and away from his past fame. Unfortunately, as you can see, it's not really working out that way at the moment. Looking at our destination, we can see that the distance of a statue of a deer signaling that the preparations for a local festival are in effect, which adds life to the mostly inactive city. A few houses fill the limited land, as most of it resides in a beautiful valley with mountains, trees, endless water, and globes most of the environment. Even if it isn't much, it's easily relatable as this is the ideal living space for most people who want to live connected to nature. A colossal view welcoming you every time you wake up, a low crime level with a small but invested community sounds appealing to most people, so even if those things aren't said in the game, we can easily imagine it and fill in the gaps. Every building is also accounted for and serves a defining purpose, which contrasts with the background that Alan comes from. Even if we haven't seen where and how he lives, we can imagine it, and that isn't something that is said for the Chant. We get into the car and Alice drives us to the local diner. She needs to do something before they leave, so she asks him to go inside and retrieve the keys for the new residence from a man called Carl Stuckey. They're essentially renting his secluded cabin if they all agreed to meet him there. He then answers the diner, and this next scene depicts exactly what Alan was running away from.
I'd forgotten there were still places like this. Towns where everybody knew everybody.
Welcome to the Oh Dear Diner.
Hi, I was wondering if you could help me. I'm looking for...
Mr. Wake. Alan Wake. Oh, God! I am your biggest fan. I know people say that all the time, but I really am.
I'm glad to hear that.
Rose.
Rose, I'm looking for Mr. Stuckey. Carl Stuckey?
Carl? Oh, of course, Mr. Wake. He must have gone to visit the restroom. He'll be back in a moment.
As you can see, he's not that excited, and he's even less happy about the fact that his face is right next to the entryway. Looking around, the diner looks exactly how you would expect it. American style with references to nature, which gives it a warm, small town vibe. The irony is that the most capitalistic aspect of this diner is his goofy face at the entrance, reminding the clients of the band, so to speak. The other thing that clashes with the style of the diner are the two brothers sitting at the end of the room. They're two old rockers who ran away from the retirement home in order to relax and listen to some jams. One of them asks us to play a vinyl with a song called Coconut, and if we do so, we get this cool banger.
Just because we're brothers, don't think I won't murder
It does
you
that.
in your
Get
sleep.
stuck. Yeah, you need to give it a good solid whack. Yes, that's my favorite tune. Coconut.
Shut your mouth, you demented has-been.
Now that's what
I
I'm
had my
talking
hammer, I'd
about.
Shut it
Yeah.
for you. This is it. I've died and gone to hell.
It's really cool how the devs found a way to give so much personality and history just with this small interaction. The clashing personality between the two brothers creates this naturally funny skit, which never gets old. They also stay together even if one irritates the other, which is rare to see nowadays, but really encapsulates the idea of a small town. One other cool fact that challenges this concept is the fact that these two guys were rockers during their young age. We can hear a few tracks from the band throughout the game, which is a nice touch as it adds to the believability of the universe. It's one thing when you say something, and it's another when you let the gamer experience it, and again, this is totally optional. When we get to the end of the room, there's an old lady holding a lantern warning us not to go in there as...
You can hurt yourself in the dark.
I think I can handle it, ma'am.
Alan obviously doesn't believe her, the same way that we wouldn't believe her if we were in his shoes, so we enter the corridor and walk into the dark.
Hello? Mr. Stuckey?
Carl couldn't make it. Unfortunately, he was taken ill. But I have the key for you and instructions on how to get to the lake.
Okay.
I wish you a good stay in my cabin. I'll come by later to check how you've settled in. And to meet your wife. I insist.
Thanks.
Now that that creepy encounter is settled, we can now get out with the keys and enter the car.
Bye, Mr. Wake.
Mission accomplished. The key and the directions.
My hero. I got some flashlights, just in case.
Hey, wait! Mrs. Wake! Your keys!
I need to give credit where credit is due. I just love how the devs are able to add so much suspense and intrigue in a short period of time. We're only 22 minutes in, and so much has happened to get us invested in the story. We finally arrive at the cabin, and it's exactly what you would expect from a man trying to run away from society. It's the embodiment of Alan's current mental state, and a beautiful one of that. It's also one that we can't enjoy, as we don't know what awaits us inside. We find out that the house doesn't have electricity, and as Alice is afraid of being alone in the dark, it's our job to restore order and to find a way to get it working. We rapidly find a generator located at the end of the path, and after completing the button prompt, the cabin is now operational. We enter the cabin and Alice calls us upstairs, so we head to the second floor, open the door, and wow.
Hello there.
I'm not the surprise.
Well, that's awkward.
It's in the study. Go take a look.
Okay.
We turn around and open the door, only to find our present lying on the desk.
Surprise!
Alice? What is this?
I guess I have a small confession to make. I thought maybe you could write here that a change of scenery would get you past—
Damn it, Alice, everyone keeps—
Hey, just hear me out. There's a local doctor, Dr. Hartman. I read a book of his. He has a private clinic here. He specializes in helping artists.
So now you want to get me committed?
No, it's not like that. That's not— Alan? Alan?
Just don't! I don't want to hear it! God damn it, Alice! God damn it! I knew she wouldn't follow me in the dark. Damn it. Alice? Alice? Alice!
At the brink of breaking, Alan decides to set his feelings aside and storm towards the house. We get attacked by the crows that were in front of the house, but I honestly just don't care. I'm sure that Alan will gladly take damage and risk his life in order to save his treasured wife.
Alice? Alice? Oh no!
Now, I'll stop the narration here as the first chapter of Alan Wake is a little longer than an hour long, and it wouldn't be fair to the other game if I continued. As my trend critique covers the first 30 minutes of the game, then it would only be natural if I did the same thing here, right? I just want to end this little sneak peek by stating that I really love Alan Wake and will recommend it to you even if you haven't played it already. There are a lot of twists and turns that I haven't spoiled, therefore you still have a lot to discover if you decide to pick it up. It's available on Steam and the console version got a remaster recently, so it's definitely worth picking up on Xbox or PlayStation. It's also available on Game Pass in case you have it. Another note, if you want me to make a dissecting the walk video on Alan Wake, please let me know in the comments below, and do like and subscribe at the same time. These videos take an excruciatingly long time to make, and it does boost my morale to know that you're enjoying yourself. Now with all that said, let's see what the devs that made the Chant can learn from Alan Wake. Now, if we disregard all the technical issues, as it's not fair to compare an almost 12-year-old game with a game that got released about a month or two ago, we can easily compare their core elements and realize that the Chant is subpar in every single way. The easiest way of seeing it is by examining your own enjoyment on my video. Which game did you enjoy the most? I'm ready to bet that Alan Wake will win that vote, as one of its main reasons is because of all the energy that's on display throughout the whole intro sequence. At the beginning of the game, we're constantly responding to all the elements thrown our way, from the shadowy aggressor attacking us to ravaging tornadoes, demolishing buildings, and so much more. That gimmick gets turned around its head when the entity shows us how to defend ourselves, changing the way we perceive the situation. We're no longer running away and reacting to the environment, but are now pushing forward and lighting ourselves a path through the darkness. No pun intended. We no longer fear the unknown, and once we start to get the hang of it, a tornado appears and reminds us of our mortality. It makes us feel like we're in a blockbuster movie, and by doing so, we get this interesting pacing that feels like we're constantly switching gears, moving at different speeds, allowing us to learn new things while we're interacting with the universe. Additionally, by having an action-packed introduction, it is easier to hide the tutorial and make it part of a natural flow of the game. By doing so, it doesn't feel like we're going through the checklist, and in return, it creates a sense of unity between the player and the characters on screen. We learn to adapt to Alan, and by experimenting with him early on, we're more inclined to mold ourselves to him and get a sense of the core gameplay loop. Mix in the constant buildup of intrigue, and you have a captivating game that hooks you right from the start and makes it hard to drop the remote, even when the game starts drifting on the side of the road, so to speak. When you compare all of that with the Chant, I think that it's abundantly clear what he should have done instead, which is to pump more life in the world around the player. The game feels like it's stalling on the first gears, turning an interesting concept into something monotonous. Additionally, it doesn't feel like the place existed before we arrive, because everyone is doing their own separate thing, and none of that is shown to the player, unlike in Alan Wake, where we see movement and preparation for the foreshadowing to come. The biggest sin in this regard is the fact that it all feels inconsequential. Two people are talking to the corner and don't include us in the discussion. Sony is looking at the map without any real reason why, and Maya is in her corner making some tea. It's all static and, well, normal. The worst part is that it all goes against the message of the game. How can I believe that they're all good people and then get the opposite feeling? It all accumulates together, making an experience that feels watered down. We all play games for different reasons, and I believe that the reason we play story-driven games is in order to live in someone else's shoes. We want to discover something intriguing. We want to do stuff that we normally can't do. We want to meet characters that are bigger than life, people that are different from those we meet on a regular basis. We want a game that has a vision, and one that sweeps us from under our feet and takes us away to another world, no matter how grounded or not it may be. By contrast, nothing makes me want to be there or in Jess's shoes because nothing unique or memorable is happening. Imagine if we got to the island, right, and they were preparing a feast for our arrival. It would make sense, as I doubt that they welcome people on a regular basis. We will help them out with the installation, which will also serve as a natural tutorial, kind of when we hit the jukebox in the restaurant. We would then get to meet everyone, exchange some dialogue, and get a better sense of the vibe of the area. This would also be the perfect moment for Tyler to wow us and show us why coming here was the right thing to do. It would ultimately humanize them and allow us to get a sense of how they are as a person, in the same vein as when we met the two brothers in the restaurant. Then, once you have a positive experience and started thinking that it was a good gig, then make the Eldritch Horror appear and turn it all into Arkham. The bigger the contrast in team and general energy, the more we'll be intrigued and want to discover what happened. We would have a reason to push onward and save everyone. We would also be so invested that we wouldn't question ourselves about simple unlogical things like why would the group send Jess to save everyone when literally everyone else would have been more qualified? She doesn't know the layout, the pitfalls, the shortcuts, or how anything works for the matter. So why not ask Anna to do it in our stead? The answer would essentially be shrugged off and we wouldn't care about it. I know that what I'm suggesting would be a lot more expensive than what they did, as it would require new assets, new dialogue lines, new animations, and so forth. So if I had to simplify the bottom line, it would be that we need a reason to build a positive experience for it to be flipped on its backside when shit hits the fan. The greater the difference, the more memorable it would be. Because right now, the most memorable part ends up being the ones that you don't want me to remember because you haven't given me a reason to remember anything else. Thank you for getting to the end of the video, and honestly, I just want to take the time to thank you all for watching my stuff. It takes so long to make. This video was also supposed to be released about 2-3 weeks ago. I had to reshoot about 40% of it. The whole Island Way Park had to be reshot because I just wasn't satisfied with the end result. And once I did that and reworked the script a little bit, get some people feedback, I got sick. That's probably why I sound maybe a little weird. I'm not really sure. I'll find out when I check the audio. But I lost my voice for a good week and a half. I just got it back about 2 weeks ago. This video was done about 90% of it. I wanted to get it released before the end of last year, but you know, that's just how it is when you get sick, right? It's not something you can plan. So I just want to take the time to thank you all for essentially watching my stuff and for supporting what I do. I want to thank my friend Jean-Manon for proof checking, giving me his feedback. Same thing with my brother. Same thing with my family and girlfriend for giving me support. And thank you, the viewer. I hope that you enjoyed yourself and you learned something on the way. I'm also going to be doing more of these. I really enjoyed studying and finding more research and bringing more stats. I hope that you enjoyed that as well, and I'm hoping that more of my videos will get into that. Currently, I'm working on Layers of Fear. I'll be going through all of the Bloober Team games because I want to get us ready for the new Silent Hill remake. And that one I will be studying a bunch of artists because, you know, there's a lot of paintings in that game in general. It's going to be pretty fun. So I just want to thank you all again. This has been awesome. It's been a lot of fucking work. But I hope that you enjoyed yourself. And I mean, as a real third video of my channel, I think it's pretty good quality overall. So have a nice day, and I'll see you on the next video. Bye now.